Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight for our second town hall meeting to talk about seawater desalination. Tonight's meeting, because of COVID, the COVID pandemic, is being brought to you in a virtual way, and our audience is joining us through various mediums. Some persons are watching it on the city's public access channel, CCTV 20. We have some folks using YouTube, and then the town hall is also being broadcast on Facebook Live, and we have a pretty significant audience watching there. To hear tonight's presentation in Spanish, we've provided that as well, so the entire video presentation, Q&A can be heard in Spanish, and there is a number to dial that has been provided already, but I want to provide it here in case somebody hasn't had a chance to see it before. And so that number is 1-408-418-9388. It's a conference call number. So after you call that number, you want to dial 1-465-559-2745 and then hit the pound sign twice. So double pound after that 2745 number. Great. So the goal for our town halls is to provide the community with greater awareness and understanding of the city's efforts in pursuing seawater desalination as a way to improve our region and our region's Corpus Christi and really the coastal bend, as you'll learn tonight, but to improve our region's water security and supply for generations to come. So let me begin, though, by introducing myself, in case you don't know who I am. I am Peter Zanoni, the city manager of Corpus Christi. And tonight, as you can see on the camera, I'm joined by Mayor Joe McComb and Kevin Norton, our public utilities, water public utilities director is here with me as well. There's other city staff in other rooms that you'll see soon in the program. We also have some staff from Freeze and Nichols who has been helping the city in a contract capacity for several years. And one of those persons joining us is Jason Coughlin, and he's here as well. You'll see him momentarily. And so we're excited to come together as a city team, and we're glad that you're joining us in this way so you can learn more about this very important effort for the city, for you, for commercial entities, for industry. It's really about finding more water for our region. We want to continue to grow as a city, but as you'll see, we're at our maximum capacity in terms of water. And so to continue to grow, to continue to attract jobs, the city has been, and we need to, in earnest, find more water. And the goal tonight is to let you know about the source that we're looking at, which is seawater desalination. I want to thank the staff, before I continue too much more, that has put all this on. It's taken a lot of time and effort and energy, and we want to thank them, those working behind the scenes to make this possible for you tonight. When it comes to water security for our region, it has been the city's history that you'll see that really speaks for itself. There's been a lot of hard work done over the decades and really the century of our history as a city to find water for the immediate people that are here at that point in time, but also for future generations. It's been something that our forefathers and foremothers have worked hard on over the past 100 years. And as you probably know, or as you will know, we still have work to do. We have to find more water and a secure source for our generation today still, and then for many in the future to come. What we want to do now is show you a video that'll help demonstrate that, to show that we've been a city that has been on the move, and in part it's because we've been after water, and we need to continue to do that. This video just takes 2 minutes, but it's a great video that demonstrates that and kind of highlights that. And so we want you to watch this, and then when we come back, Mayor Joe McComb is going to speak to us next. Thank you.
Potential. From Alvarez de Pineda to Colonel Kinney, this city knows how to maximize potential. It was once the potential of the Nueces River that the Karankawa people, Spanish explorers, and General Zachary Taylor depended on. But as Corpus Christi began to swell in population, it became essential to find water that was fit to drink and easier to obtain. From burros pulling water barrels to the first pump house in Calallen, our potential stood unwavering. We built a dam only for it to fail months later. So we built stronger dams and cultivated new reservoirs. We feverishly negotiated for water sources, yearning for the basic resource necessary to live up to our potential. We've built, we've trenched, we've treated, we've piped, and we've piped again. We fought wars, survived depressions, droughts, hurricanes, recessions, oil booms, and busts. But we've come back quietly stronger every time. This is about the pain from the cistern, the barrel, and the well. We're not a grid of cosmopolitan lights settled by the banks of the Colorado River. We don't have natural springs that produce copious amounts of water. We're Corpus Christi. We've turned and poured every opportunity to its fullest potential, except one. Our bay is how we've sustained good times and bad, together as one. It's the core of our community and the gateway to our economic prosperity. It's what gives us grit, albeit salty grit, but it's what gives us potential for change. Change is a have-to-have ingredient we can't miss if we continue to grow. And growing is a part of who we are, the grass we play on, the homes we live in, the places where we work, the people we learn from, our families we love. Why turn our back on our potential when it's right there in front of us?
Well, thank you for joining us tonight. Some of you may be repeat from the meeting that we had on Tuesday, the 6th. And we're providing this so that you'll know where we've been and where we're going in this water issue, so we can meet our full potential. So if you have any questions or you want to RSVP or anything like that, if you just go to desal.cctexas.com, you can find out all of the information that's available to you on that website, much more than we'll be giving you tonight, giving you a lot more history, but we just want to make sure that you're aware of what we're doing and the importance of this project to the public. It is a huge economic development tool in terms of our project because of the fact that if we don't have water, our community can't grow. And if we can't grow, we can't provide jobs and keep our families here. So it's an extremely important project, and it's not something that's just happening in the last couple of weeks. This project has been in the works for many, many years. Back in 2001, the state of Texas divided the state of Texas into different regions to address the water needs because all of Texas was suffering from a water shortage and wanted planning to be done for each region of the state so that they would not come up short of water. And our region is Region N. And this desalination has been a strategy in their plans for at least since 2001, and this is 2020. So you can see it's been 20 years in the making in terms of getting put on the front burner and beginning to move forward. In 2013, Mayor Nelda Martinez established the Mayor's Blue Ribbon Water Panel to begin to study what our options were for the future, because we've been through a drought back in the mid-'80s and then again in the mid-'90s and in 2010 to 2015, excuse me. And so she put this panel together in 2013 in the midst of that, what became known as the drought of record from 2010 to 2015. And during that drought of record, all of our water sources, Lake Corpus Christi, Choke Canyon Reservoir, Lake Texana, and the Garwood Irrigation Company, our water supply was down to 29.9%. And that's significant for a community that's trying to grow and meet its needs of the customers. There were 500,000 customers that the city is responsible for providing water for. So when we got on the council in 2017, the process had already begun and has been started. And from April of 2017 through April of 2020, I have a list here of at least 17 public meetings through the city council process that have been held on desalination and related subjects with desalination, but they all pertain to desal, and that's 17 just in since April of 2017, 2020. So it's not something that's new. There's been a substantial amount of information provided to the public. Much of it probably the public didn't participate in. The interest level may not have been there, but for whatever. But the staff and the councils have been working on this project of finding us an uninterruptible water supply for many, many years. And this is just one more step in that pursuit to meet our potential. The one thing we can't forget, and we're not going to forget, and that's why we're here tonight, is the public needs to be aware of this. And I think as close as we get, probably the interest level obviously is going up. And that's why we're taking these extraordinary steps to make sure that the public understands what we're doing and why we're doing it. But there's nothing more critical in our future than having a water supply. That's been proven in the past. So we want to begin this effort to make sure we have that water supply and clear up any questions that you may have or misunderstandings of what you have. But one of the things that we've heard considerable conversation about, which is an error, is that many are making the statements that this is for industry and industry ought to pay for it. This water is going to be potable water. It's going to be available for all of our 500,000 plus customers. And it's water that you can drink, you can take showers with, wash your dishes with, cook, water your grass, whatever you need. It's water that everybody can participate in. And then I think we all need to realize too, that this trying to separate industry from our community that's just an impossible task, because the people that are working in our industry are the same people that you go to church with, the same people as your children play Little League baseball or football or soccer. They're people that you mix with all day long, every day of the year. And if it wasn't for industry, those folks wouldn't be here. So you can't separate industry from the community. It's part of us. That's who we are in Corpus Christi. And so that's why this water is so extremely important for everyone, because if people don't have water, we can't live. If industry doesn't have water, they can't provide the jobs, and therefore we just a wilt on the vine. So it's an extremely important project, probably one of the most important ones that the council will deal with, in addition to many other important ones. So at this point, the staff has, like I said, been working for many hours and years on this, but we wanted to keep you brought up to date. And so I'm going to turn it over now back to the city manager, because this is what really is the important part of this participation in the project tonight. So you become familiar with the extraordinary amount of work and time that's been put into this project. And I think you'll be impressed with the professionalism and the thoroughness, both of our engineers that have hired and also our city staff. So, Mr. Zanoni.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mayor. Tonight, we're going to hear next from three speakers that are going to talk to you. I'm going to introduce them in a moment, give you a little bit about their background. But what they'll talk to you about is the following. We're going to talk to you about our current water resources. Where does our water come from today? To help you understand that, to give you some baseline context. We'll talk about the sources of water that affect our supply and demand, or how those sources of water affect our supply and demand in the region. We're going to spend a few minutes just talking to you about seawater desalination, kind of a 101. What is it and how does it work? Make sure you understand kind of the background on it. We want to talk to you about environmental responsibility and how the city, as we develop these plans to have a seawater desalination plant, how that has been a very important part of the analysis. We'll talk to you about Corpus Christi's Bay sustainability and measures that we're taking to make sure it stays in the shape that it's in today, even with a seawater desalination plant. And then after that, we'll be ready to listen to you in terms of your questions, and then the staff will provide answers, either myself, the mayor, Kevin Norton, or other staff that's with us tonight. So momentarily, I'm going to turn it over to our presenters, and that includes Esteban, who also goes by the name of Steve Ramos, Jason Coughlin, and Kevin Norton. You can see their pictures here on the screen. Jason is a licensed environmental engineer with Freeze and Nichols, and we are using Freeze and Nichols to help us with very important analysis and highly scientific stuff that we need to progress forward. For the past 6 years, Jason has been working side by side with our water utilities team, and he is helping to conduct important environmental impact and sustainability research and surveys for not only site locations, but also for permitting and for planning. Kevin Norton, who you saw earlier in this room, is the Director of Water Utilities, and he started with the city's Water Utilities Department team about 2 years ago. Kevin oversees a very large department. It's our largest city department of over 500 employees with an annual operating budget of $250 million. His focus is on operations, and he'll be instrumental in leading his staff through the Seawater desalination project. And then our third presenter who you'll hear from is Steve Ramos, as I mentioned. He's the city's water resource manager, and he works in the water utilities department as well. In his 4 years with the city of Corpus Christi, he has been engaged with seawater desalination, from education to environmental research and to understanding the region's supply and historic water challenges. And then also Deanna McQueen, who won't be presenting, but she is our communications director. And she will be, she is here, and she'll be taking all the questions that come in, whether it's Facebook or YouTube or via the telephone. And she'll be kind of a live moderator that will ask the questions that you pose to us, and she'll help with those answers and help to keep that part of the meeting moving along. We're going to do our best to get as many questions as we can from you tonight. Our first meeting earlier this week, we got through just about all the questions. I think there may have been one or two that we did not get to, and we're going to get to those tonight. The schedule has us going to 7:15, and we want to be mindful of people's time. That's the time that we published, and we want to make sure people can move on to their next event for tonight. So we'll do our best to end at 7:15. We may end a few minutes after, but if there's some questions that we don't get to in that time period, we'll bring those up in our first meeting next week, which will be on Monday, the 12th. Okay, so if we can't get to all the questions tonight because of that time commitment that we have with the community, we'll make sure those questions come up first on Monday, the 12th of October. Okay, so with that introduction, let me turn it over to Esteban Ramos. Is Steve going first?
Yes, sir.
Steve, okay. Esteban, we're going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. The city of Corpus Christi has spent decades to secure our water supply for the Coastal Bend region. As the wholesale water provider for nearly 500,000 customers, we have 4 surface water sources: 2 from the Nueces River Basin, Choke Canyon, and Lake Corpus Christi; 2 from the eastern region, where we contract water from Lake Texana and have water rights along the Colorado River at Bay City. These eastern water supplies flow through the Mary Roads pipeline and are delivered to our Owen Stevens water treatment plant in Calallen. Each surface water source has a unique history and special characteristics. They make it possible for our region to have water. The demand in our region creates unique challenges as well. With regards to supply and demand, it starts with understanding what a firm yield of supply is. Our firm yield of supply is the amount of water that we can guarantee during a drought of record. Corpus Christi City Council established that when demand reaches 75% of our firm yield, a new source of water needs to be added. Within the 2022-2023 timeframe, with the new growth to the Coastal Bend, our projected demand will meet or exceed the 75% trigger point threshold of our firm yield. With the addition of a drought-proof seawater desalination plant, we reduce the risk of exceeding the 75% trigger point. Jason, can you talk a little more about what seawater desalination is?
Thank you, Steve. What you see here on the slide is really just an illustrative process diagram. So this isn't specifically focused on the exact processes or configuration that will be implemented here in the Coastal Bend, but it is representative of a typical treatment process for seawater. Seawater desalination is just the process of removing dissolved solids, which are mostly salts, from seawater. There's a lot of treatment that must be done even before the desalination can take place. And so the entire process includes two major treatment areas. We talk about those in terms of pre-treatment and then the desalination itself. The pre-treatment portion of the process can actually look very much like a conventional surface water treatment plant, like the city's Owen Stevens water treatment plant. The processes involved here are coagulation, flocculation, sedimentation, and then filtration. So after going through all of that treatment, the water is then ready to go to the reverse osmosis for desalination. Reverse osmosis, or RO, uses membranes to extract fresh water from the seawater. You may remember learning a little bit about osmosis in school, so if that sounds familiar, there's a reason for it. It's just a natural process that actually goes on all the time in our bodies, where things are coming to equilibrium based on concentrations. So if that's the natural process that those concentrations would come to equilibrium, we have to reverse that process by adding energy in the form of pressure to get fresh water out of the seawater. There are 4 specific process streams or components that I want to talk about a little more in detail. The freshwater product from the RO system is very clean. As a matter of fact, at this point in the process, it's gone through at least 4 progressive levels of filtration. It's so clean that we have to add minerals back to stabilize the water before it can be disinfected and then put into the city's existing drinking water distribution system. So the water produced from the desalination plant for the city of Corpus Christi will be drinking water. When fresh water is removed from the seawater in the RO process, one of the other process streams is just concentrated seawater. We call this concentrate. It has the same salts and ionic balance as the bay water that comes into the system. This waste stream is also very clean. It's gone through 3 of the 4 filtration levels at the plant. It's just salty, and it's a little less than twice as salty as the water that we bring into the process. The third product that I want to talk about, we call residuals. This is the constituents in the seawater that come into the plant and are removed by the treatment process, but these do not go back into the bay. These are primarily removed through pre-treatment and then dewatered and would be properly disposed of at a landfill. The residuals will include the silt, the sediment, other suspended solids like algae, but we also have the benefit through the pre-treatment process of removing zinc and copper and other heavy metals that will not be returned to the bay. We don't remove those at 100% efficiency, but at a very high efficiency, which means we're actually filtering out some of the heavy metals that won't go back into the bay. The fourth component that I just want to touch on really quickly, and it's pretty small on this figure, but it's the energy recovery system. And this, it's not the heart of the desal process, that would be the RO, but this is a component of the process and the reason that seawater desalination has really become more feasible, more cost-effective, and more efficient just in the past 20 years. The energy recovery system can either be mechanical or based on pressure, but what it allows us to do is recover about 95% of the energy that's in the waste stream and return that energy to the process for the reverse osmosis. All of this is a big part of what goes into our approach for environmental responsibility. Every aspect of the city's desal initiative is shaped by the commitment to stewardship. Stewardship of the unique and amazing ecosystem we have in the Coastal Bend, and stewardship of local resources and finances. And finally, stewardship of a sustainable and reliable water supply for the region, as the city manager and mayor have already touched on. To approach this project as sustainably as possible, we've put together a team of experts, including multiple PhDs, environmental engineers, environmental scientists, aquatic ecologists, desal technologists who have global expertise, and other experts in power purchase agreements and procurement contracts. So we take this responsibility very seriously, but mostly the responsibility to protect the environment. And I want to go into a little bit of detail on a few particular aspects especially when it comes to that environmental responsibility. The selection of project sites on the Inner Harbor and the La Quinta Channel began with a review of previously developed siting studies and evaluations that date back about 20 years. Next, we worked with experts from across the region. This included stakeholders around the coastal bend to help define and prioritize the screening and evaluation criteria you see on the slide. Just the effort to go into developing and defining these criteria and then prioritizing them took months of time, and that's before we applied these criteria to the sites. The siting work was very significant. It also included state and federal resource agencies. After the initial identification of potential sites, 19 sites across the coastal bend were screened, and you can see the screening criteria that were used here. Unfortunately, we don't have time tonight to go into each of those, but it was a balance of making sure that the cornerstone of the project, environmental sustainability, was met, and that we could also balance the social, the water quality, the location for the intake and outfall, and costs, as well as the other criteria. Based on the established criteria, the project team mapped ecosystems like seagrasses and sensitive species like oysters, piping plovers, and others. The siting process objective was to find an optimal balance between all of these criteria. And based on these, the 2 project sites were selected, and permit applications for both water rights and discharge were filed with the TCEQ. A major part of this site selection, and you can see it in the criteria, was shaped by considerations for the intake and the outfall. There are countless considerations to address when we talk about a seawater intake. This could be a presentation all of its own, but we're planning to use the absolute best available technology that can be applied for the city's projects when you consider local geotechnical conditions and geography. This includes very small openings at the inlet where the seawater comes in. These openings are just 2 to 3 millimeters wide. So if you put a stack of 2 pennies on your table, that stack is just 3 millimeters tall. So that's the width of the openings where the water comes into the process. Through those openings, we also want to make sure that we maintain really low velocities. So the velocities we're talking about are just a half a foot per second. So the water is going to be moving through those openings at about 6 inches a second. And to put that in relative terms, that's about 10 times slower than the average walking pace. Both of these parameters, the narrow openings and the low velocities, exceed regulatory requirements for a seawater desalination intake. Another key element for the intake is the depth at which it's installed. We know that seagrasses grow in less than 7 feet of water because that's where they can get enough sunlight. And the intake can provide very good, consistent water quality at a depth of about 20 feet to ensure that the intake remains away from seagrasses. The outfall also requires serious consideration and review. Again, this is just an illustrative figure, and this is indicative of a jet diffusion process, which is the technology and the process that will be used for reintroducing the concentrate to the receiving water body. The desal plant outfall is a critical component, and another one for which the city is going above and beyond to exceed regulatory requirements and to make sure we're stewarding and considering our ecosystem resources. The outfall, which is going to be jet diffusion, is a process that uses energy, basically in the form of velocity, to mix the concentrate with the receiving water to meet the diffusion criteria close to the outfall. And regulators define this in 3 mixing zones, and in each of those zones, the plant will have to meet diffusion criteria and not exceed salinity levels that are set by the permit. The temperature of the concentrate will be less than 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit above the water that comes into the system. The only heat that's added is through minor losses in friction, for instance, through a pump. One key piece of documentation used in the evaluation considerations for both the intake and the outfalls is a 2015 report by the Hart Research Institute that looks at ideal conditions and technologies for seawater desalination. Each of these components, the intake and the outfall, play into a much bigger approach to ensure bay sustainability. We're working really hard to understand the dynamics of our bays and estuaries. We know that our inshore ecosystem is unique, diverse, and very dynamic. It's bounded by barrier islands, but it is not a stagnant or closed system. And based on median freshwater inflows from our rivers and creeks, the Texas Water Development Board concluded in a study in 1994 that the entire volume of the bay is exchanged in about 1.4 years. That means that all 282 billion gallons of water in our bay system is replenished with fresh water in just 17 months. Other variables and dynamics like evaporation, precipitation, stormwater, tidal exchange with the Gulf, and municipal and industrial discharges contribute to our inshore environment and the dynamics that we have to consider when we talk about making sure our bay is sustainable. The TCEQ has surface water quality monitoring stations installed throughout the coastal bend. So we've analyzed about 40 years of water quality data and salinity in the bays. The natural salinity ranges that we see over the past 40 years are between 25 parts per thousand and 42 parts per thousand. So this is a natural change of about 17 parts per thousand. And this is pretty common for shallow bays and estuary systems. This shows that our bay and local marine species are resilient and have adapted to changing salinity conditions. Beyond that, though, we want to make sure that salinity modeling is completed to ensure sustainability. This is done with computer simulations that predict how the salt from the seawater desal plant will diffuse near the outfall and what changes can be expected far from the outfall. Our team is using 3 computer models or simulations to best understand the dynamics of the bay and how a seawater desal plant can be implemented sustainably. The city again went a step above and beyond the basic permitting requirements to make sure to capture real data on how water moves near the plant outfalls and how we can best model the concentrate dispersion. 2 instruments were installed, one at each of the proposed outfall locations, to collect channel velocity over a 6-month time frame. So these are the acoustic Doppler current profilers you see mentioned on the slide. We're incorporating all of that data into the models to make sure they're as accurate as possible. Each of these commitments are necessary guidelines that the city has implemented as part of our continued due diligence for seawater desal. I'll ask Mr. Ramos to define the project's due diligence.
Thank you. The project due diligence of 11.4 million allows the city to establish our project cornerstone. And with the preliminary design, a basis of design, as well as the request for qualifications and the development of the request for proposal, we mitigate risk from several perspectives. This includes vetting the expertise and background of our respondents, as well as understanding and ensuring the critical financial stability of potential contractors. When the time comes for an actual design and building of our seawater desalination plant, the city will look to the private sector for qualified companies to do the work. It will be our private partners that complete the architecture and construction, not Friesen Nichols and not the city of Corpus Christi. Kevin, can you talk to us more about the project cost and how it will impact ratepayers?
71 people on it.
Yes, thank you, Esteban. The city is pre-approved for up to a $222 million low-interest 30-year loan from the Texas Water Development Board. And that's comprised of the $11 million that was noted on the previous slide and the $211 million that's noted here on this slide. This $222 million is a maximum from the Texas Water Development Board, and it gives the city the flexibility to enter a multi-year approach. We're reserving up to $211 million of the loan for future construction. And as Steve previously noted, we are starting with an $11.4 million amount to continue with our due diligence in securing permits and property, refining the basis of design, and ultimately reducing as much risk as possible before the actual acquisition process begins for this project. You can think of this like a home purchase. The Texas Water Development Board has pre-approved the city for a seawater desalination plant up to $222 million. In this case, the $11.4 million on the previous slide serves as our escrow money, allowing the city the opportunity for environmental permitting, surveys, power purchase agreements, and preliminary design work to reduce risk by following our due diligence. And like a home loan, even though the city has been pre-approved for the full $222 million, it does not mean we will exhaust the $222 million we're approved for. We're operators in the Water Utilities Department, and what that means is that we look for functionality and reliability in treatment operations, and we will only use what is needed for construction. As it relates to seawater desalination, an average residential water customer, such as a family like mine, who uses 5,000 gallons of water each month, could expect to see an average increase of 77 cents per month on their monthly utilities bill for the water charges. And this is only if construction of a seawater desalination plant is approved. Our city's rate model is used for budget forecasting and can project out to 10 years. The city's practice is to adjust utility rates every 2 years. So in another 2 years, during the city's normal rate adjustment, an average increase of 77 cents per month could be anticipated again. That's a kind of an average of like 38 cents per month per year, if you want to think about it that way, if that's easier. And again, this rate adjustment is projected once every 2 years over the course of a 10-year period, which is as far as we can forecast rate adjustments. All right, where to learn more? As our mayor said, public input on this project has been important since the beginning. We continue to work hard to make sure our community is informed and empowered with facts. We hope you'll visit us online at desal.cctexas.com or join the conversation on any of social media channels. You can always reach us via phone and email too. On behalf of the staff you see here tonight, and on behalf of our city staff behind the scenes, thank you for taking the time to join us. And with that, Deanna, we can move to a Q&A.
Well, good evening, everyone. The first question comes from Facebook. Before these facilities are permitted, shouldn't the city commission a study of the cumulative impacts of the combined intake and discharges of the two facilities?
So probably Jason and Steve could answer that question.
I'd be happy to start on that, Mr. Zanoni. The cumulative impacts that we talk about that in terms of far field modeling. So I mentioned that we do modeling close to the outfall, which looks at those 3 mixing zones, but then we also look, basically all the way across the bay. And so we have done those studies, and we've looked at the potential cumulative impacts from the city's 2 plants that are pursuing permits. And relative to the 17 part per thousand natural variations, what we predict is 0.3 part per thousand increase in salinity across the bay. And that would be long-term steady state cumulative impact, 0.3 of a part per thousand.
And I just want to add also what we're doing is making sure that we use the best practices in design. And we talk about the jet diffusion that will assist us in mixing properly the concentrate into the water, and so that we have a good established mixing zone, and working with our regulatories, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, and the additional studies that we've done with the acoustic Doppler profiler to make sure that we understand what the bay is doing. So the city of Corpus Christi, again, is going above and beyond to make sure that we understand what our bay's life and cycle are. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you both.
Sir, I
Go ahead, Kevin.
wanted to add that just to let people know, but the studies have been going on since about the beginning. Like the mayor was talking about, this effort started in 2013. And it was shortly thereafter, the environmental studies started happening so that we could know what we're doing, conduct our due diligence, and get to the best possible place for the plant with minimal impact on the environment. So again, the study's been going on, really since the beginning of this process, and probably even longer than that, actually, with like the mayor had mentioned, this has been an idea since at least 2001 with the state of Texas region and planning.
All right, thank you, Kevin. We have another question from Facebook. Why are we spending money on a desalination plant when we have a water tower that isn't being used?
So let me begin that, and then we'll have Kevin can probably talk a little bit about it as well. So it's really two issues. One is supply and then distribution. And so the desalination effort is a supply issue. We need more water. The city will be at its capacity soon in terms of water resources. And we want to continue to grow as a community and be a competitive community in Texas for people to live here and have good jobs and raise families. And so the desalination issue is a supply issue. The water tower is a distribution issue. And we're working on both simultaneously. And so the water towers, we just recently presented to City Council an updated use plan, how we're going to bring them online. We hired some additional professionals to make sure we're doing it right. And that is in the works right now. And so we're doing some minor modifications to the towers, to the two that exist today. And they'll be brought online in a much safer way compared to the initial plan that we had. So both issues are being worked on simultaneously. Those water towers are important. TCEQ that regulates a city or anybody from for being able to do a desalination plant is the same entity that's regulating water towers and our distribution system. And so we're in compliance with them on both of those issues. I don't know if you want to add anything, Kevin, to that.
Yes, sir. No, that's a great summary, sir. I'll talk a little bit about the consultant that was hired there. They have a number of offices across the state of Texas. They've done a lot of work with elevated storage tanks and distribution systems and all the major municipalities across the state. So they're very, very well qualified for this. And one of the things that they're going to be doing, well, the city manager mentioned TCEQ. So they're going to help us out, but we do have to do some redesign work to get a bypass pump and a pressure release valve incorporated into the new elevated storage tanks. And that's to kind of help equalize the pressure. That's a design change, and the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality does have to approve that. So they're going to, once we get that design completed, we're going to be engaging with TCEQ, and we've actually continually been engaging on this. We'll continue that partnership, that working relationship with TCEQ so that they get it approved, and then we'll implement it. And at that point, then we'll be able to bring the elevated storage tanks online. And the main purpose that we have to put that in is because we just have old water distribution pipes. I mean, we have newer pipes, we've got older pipes too. And this reduces the chance of having major water main breaks in certain parts of the city, particularly the older parts of the city that have the older pipes underground.
All right, from Facebook, what is going to be done with the brine or waste?
All right, we'll have Jason and Steve answer that question.
The two primary waste streams, and we call it concentrate. Some people call it brine. Technically, brine would be concentrated up above 100 parts per thousand. When we say concentrate, that's more in the range of 60 parts per thousand. So the liquid salty stream, the concentrate, is going to be dispersed using jet diffusion back into the locations that we've identified in the permits, the Inner Harbor and Whitby. And then the solids, the silt, sediment, algae, some of the heavy metals and other things that are removed in pretreatment, those are actually dewatered and then disposed of at a landfill.
From Facebook, will a desalination
Sorry, excuse me,
plant?
Deanna?
Oh,
Deanna?
Yes.
I just wanted to add to that one because we've been asked before why not sell the brine, and like Jason was talking about, it's not, we use that term brine, but it's really concentrated, and so it's not concentrated enough to be of any revenue value, a monetary stream for the city to sell the brine to anyone. That has been looked at. That was one of the things that was looked at a couple of years ago, early in the process, as a possibility for the seawater desalination plant here in the city. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. From Facebook, will a desalination plant damage fishing?
It won't, but let's have Jason elaborate on that answer that I just gave. Or Steve, yeah.
I'll turn it over to Jason in a second, but really what the city of Corpus Christi is doing is to making sure all of the efforts go into not harming our bay and estuaries. So it is important for the city because we understand. I'm an avid fisherman. I've been all my life up and down the Laguna Madre and fishing in this area, and I wouldn't want to do anything that harms the potential of our fishery. And so we do all the due diligence that we've explained and going above and beyond, making sure that we use the best technologies so that we don't have an impact on our fishing.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Steve. And I don't have a lot to add to that outside of, there was a really interesting study done on a very large seawater desal plant in California on their intake specifically, as far as actually how much marine biology by mass was brought into the system. And what that study ended up determining, and this was a plant that was 40 plus million gallons a day, was that the equivalent mass of marine biology that came into the system, and usually it's pretty small organisms, was about the same as what a couple of pelicans could consume in a day. So the impact of these facilities, and again, there are over 16,000 seawater desal facilities around the globe. So the process and the technologies are very well understood, and we can make them as minimally impactful as possible.
And also going back to how we're using the low velocities, the intake, so that we don't have any issues with the impingement and entrapment of species, and making sure that we're at the adequate depth and away from the seagrasses. And in our sighting efforts, we made it a responsibility of ours to look for areas where we would have those low impacts.
Okay, great.
Right.
Yes, go ahead, Deanna.
Another Facebook question. Why don't you instruct your appointees to oppose the port's projects, especially when they want to build on Harbor Island, which the city opposes?
That's a that's a good question. Mayor, you want to?
Well, the port initially had offered to help facilitate the city and its acquisition. And I think they started that process, and I think they're going to pursue it. And from what the understanding that we have with the executive director and the port commissioners is that permit, if it is approved, will be for the benefit of the city at some point in the future. But I think Jason could address the issues right now in terms of what they went through on the site selection for our purposes. But that permit, if it is acquired for Harbor Island, would be available, I don't know how far in the future, but right now, and we appreciate the port's support on that, and they're looking to help, obviously because of our growth and the need for water. But the impact and the cost for the purposes for which we're doing, and if Jason would go through kind of the process, it was on one of our sites. We didn't just initially wipe it off the list. They went through an exhaustive study. Go a little bit, Jason, through that site selection. I think that'd be pretty interesting to a lot of people.
Yes, sir. So specifically for Harbor Island, I can talk about how we approach that from a site selection perspective. So Harbor Island was one of the 19 sites we call those potential sites from all over the region. And, it didn't even make it down to the final 4. We didn't even get to an environmental assessment or anything like that on it. What it came down to for this project for Harbor Island was looking at the power requirements for a seawater desalination plant of this size. You're talking about close to 10 megawatts of power for every 10 million gallons produced. And what we found was that power infrastructure was just not there on Harbor Island. It would be very, very cost prohibitive to install. And then also the distribution for the treated water, so the water that comes out of the desal plant, there's not a really high demand in the immediate area of Harbor Island, which means you would have to pump that water quite a distance in order to serve customers with the water. And so there's a lot of strategy that goes into balancing all of those criteria, but the two that we focused on for Harbor Island were the power requirements. And again, Harbor Island just doesn't have the infrastructure, or didn't at the time. And then sending that water to where it could actually be used was a challenge as well.
All right, this next question comes from our call center. Can you name 10 desalination plants that were built on time and on budget?
Jason, do you have any?
Not off the top of my head, out of the 16,000 around the world, I don't have that data. That's something that we could certainly put together if we needed to.
Okay, and that's good. So the one point is, though, that this is technology that's been around for decades, and 16,000 plants across the world. That's what you said, right, Jason?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. All right, Deanna, we'll go with the next question.
Yes, sir. This is from Facebook. If $1.3 billion is not the cost of building these facilities, what is the cost of building them to the maximum yield being sought in the permits?
Right, so the one plant that we're talking about right now on the inner channel, the inner harbor, the ship channel, would be the high estimate, and we expect that number to come down as we refine design and move through the permitting process. Right now, we have a budget of $211 million for the construction. And part of the loan that we're taking out has another 11 million for permitting, some pre-design work, land acquisition, and power supply work. So in total, about 220 when you take the work that would go into this first loan that we're going to take from the Texas Water Development Board. That's the maximum. We expect, though, quite likely it will be under that. And just last week at City Council, we had 10 companies present water supply sources. It was from an older request for information that the city had put out a little over a year ago. And of those 10 companies, 6 had desalination plant proposals, and their cost estimates were in line with the ones that we have forecasted with Freeze and Nichols pre-engineering help. And so some were a little bit less, but others were a little bit more. And so what that confirmed last Tuesday at the city council meeting from 6 different companies having 6 different plant proposals, desalination plant proposals, is that the number that we have that's been developed by the experts at Freeze and Nichols with the city team is in line with industry standards from companies in Texas, in the country, and really around the globe. So that's a pretty good number that we're using right now. We'll go to the next question, Deanna.
Yes, from Facebook. Do you agree desalination is a common solution for producing water globally?
I don't know if Jason, do you want to talk about that, Jason? Because you have probably the best, you and Steve, in terms of really understanding the industry.
Yes, sir. And the simple answer to that question is yes. You know, as population has grown around the world and demand for clean water has grown around the world, these systems have transitioned from thermal, which is very highly energy intense, into pressure and become more and more efficient. You know, as we see globally, the majority of water on the globe, I think 97+% of the water on the globe is salty. So as demand for fresh water increases, we have to use these new technologies. And desal is not a new technology, but some of the advancements in that technology allow this project to become more feasible. But certainly with, you know, over 16,000 plants around the world, this is a resource that is now being leveraged for populations all over the place.
That's exactly right. And the opportunity that seawater desalination provides for our region, it also provides the ability to leverage our dependence upon our surface water. A lot of the benefits to our bays and estuaries come from those surface water supplies. being able to balance the overall supply out in our system so that we can meet our demands is beneficial for the entire region and also our bays and estuaries. So the idea and the technology of seawater desalination, as it becomes more economically feasible, and the opportunities that we gain from teaming with the Texas Water Development Board and gaining these low interest loans and these opportunities with the state, it gives us an overall great opportunity so that we can diversify our portfolio of water supply and protect everything.
All right, thank you, Steve. From Facebook, are there any projects or locations that may resemble ours or at least be relative to our own plans?
Yeah, Jason or Steve, maybe if you want to continue answering that question.
You know, I think every plant is pretty unique, and especially when you consider location, circumstances like I mentioned with geography and geotechnical conditions, water quality conditions, the process has to be adapted. You know, one of the things that we talk about in environmental engineering is that most people would say that water is the same everywhere, but really it's a challenge and has its own complexities everywhere. And so we've adapted what is a well understood process and technology for conditions here in the coastal bend that have been studied and continue to be studied. There are a few plants around the world, large scale seawater desal plants that are located on inshore bays and estuary systems. I would say that I can't think of one that matches our conditions exactly, but that's partly because our ecosystem and our inshore environment are so unique, which is why the city has gone above and beyond, even exceeding regulatory requirements to make sure that we not only understand that ecosystem, but consider it and move forward sustainably.
And we continue to learn, and that's the process. The city of Corpus Christi, again, like Jason has said, is going above and beyond, making sure that we understand our current conditions and being able to cite, being able to use the best practices that the world has to offer, and to bring all that expertise and experience to this region. And so we all have packaged the project so that we can learn from all these different steps around the world.
All right, everyone, bear with me. This question is a little bit long. It's from Facebook. Why doesn't the city suspend activity on all of these permits, demand that all of the engineers and scientists come together and come up with a single solution that would have intake and discharge in the Gulf of Mexico, as encouraged by the Texas legislature and recommended by the Texas General Land Office and Texas Parks and Wildlife?
So we're gonna, Jason and Steve, we'll have you address that, but I would say the short answer is that's what has happened and continues to happen. There's a team of people that have been studying the issue, and as we talked on public radio earlier this week, this same team of persons, it's a balancing act, and you heard Jason use that term. There's no one right answer, but the one that you do pursue, you have to balance out various factors. We already talked a little bit about those, to include power and is it close to your distribution system. And so I don't think there's any one perfect answer, but the key is to make sure you're balancing all factors. And I think that's what the team has done. And it includes persons that are highly qualified on the Freeze and Nichols team, including world-renowned persons that have written books on seawater and other desalinization. It includes, right here in Corpus Christi, the Hart Research Institute that is affiliated with Texas A&M University at Corpus Christi. It includes our own professional staff that have been in the water business for decades. And that's what we have been doing, and we're continuing to do that. And Jason, I don't know if you want to add to that, or Steve.
Yes, I think specifically with what the Texas legislature did to expedite the permitting process for an offshore discharge and an offshore intake was absolutely a step in the right direction for making sure that projects like this are done sustainably and could also be implemented quickly if needed. But that also means that any permit application that's not offshore, you know, the distance that the legislature and GLO and other groups had determined would be given the appropriate level of scrutiny from state regulators and scientists to make sure that it was done sustainably. So the recommendations in the expedited permitting process for offshore didn't eliminate the option to do this inshore, didn't say that it couldn't be done inshore sustainably, but it said that any application, you know, offshore would be expedited and an application inshore would go through the regulatory process, which includes Parks and Wildlife and others who get to review and comment on those applications, but that would be given the scrutiny to make sure that it's done sustainably.
And I would just like to add, and that's an important factor to note, that we are working with the state of Texas through the regulatory process and talking to them and them evaluating the permit applications and the data that goes into that study. So working with our state, working with our local scientists, this project from the very beginning has made that a cornerstone to our project, and we will continue to do that.
All right, this question comes from our call center. How much will the annual electricity cost, and will it come from locally generated wind and solar?
That's a good question. I probably, Steve or Jason again can answer. I don't think we have, it's going to be a modeled number. We don't know exactly for sure, and it depends on where we buy the power from as well, whether or not the power producer used wind turbines or not to generate the power. But Jason, do you have any more intel on that?
I wish I had that number off the top of my head, Mr. Zanoni, and I don't. We have a total operations and maintenance cost for operating and maintaining the plant for a year, and I can tell you that power is actually not the majority of that cost. We benefit from relatively low power costs here in South Texas and have modeled that conservatively in the cost of water that we've provided. And then it's up to the city and the power purchase agreement that's negotiated as far as where that power comes from.
But it also mixes with the previous question, talking about what type of scientists, use of technology. Just down the road from here is Texas A&M Kingsville, and working with Dr. Camacho and that group, we've also talked to some of their graduate students on how they can look at utilizing green power or green energy. And so the idea is there. We'll continue to foster that idea and looking at best technologies, because at the end of the day, like Kevin and I and Jason, what we want to make sure that we do is bring a project with the best feasible economic benefit to the entire region. So if we can take advantage of the low cost energies that the state of Texas can offer and this area can offer, we're going to do that for our citizens of this region.
All right, this next question is from our call center. The 2019 water report shows our system lost billions of gallons of water. Why not address the lost water first?
So as we mentioned in the previous question, and these are good questions, it's two issues and we have to address both, and we are addressing both at the same time. So water loss is a distribution issue. We have a distribution system that includes pumps and pipes underground and so on. And then there's the supply issue. And tonight's conversation on seawater desalination is supply. And we need more water. We're going to be at our maximum amount of water that we have available to us soon. And so that's one issue, supply. The distribution, things like lost water, through our pipes, where there's a break in our pipes that adds to that water loss number. That's a distribution system issue, and we can't just work on one and not the other. Because if we don't have water, there's no point in having a distribution system. But if we don't have a good distribution system, we can't ship the water right to the homes and such. So we're working on both simultaneously. Our lost water numbers have actually come down over time. And so we're making progress. We're investing a lot in the distribution system. We talked about the water towers earlier. That's part of that investment. We're doing tens of millions of dollars annually on pipe replacement. That helps on water loss. And so I think the answer is, as I stated in the beginning, that we're working on both, and we need to work on both and to continue to have a good water system.
Sir, I wanted
So Kevin's going to add one more thing, Deanna.
I just wanted to add a little bit more to what the city manager was talking about with our water distribution system. So we have almost 1,800 miles of underground pipe throughout the city. It's 1774, I think, is the number that last saw. And we are addressing this. And I just want to put the water loss into a little bit of context, because it's about 7%. I think 7.3% is what was reported lost last year. But, you know, other cities like San Antonio, Houston, Fort Worth, they're, 15, 18, 19%. So we're actually doing pretty good compared to the other major municipalities in the state of Texas. And we can get better, just like the city manager is talking about. We're investing in a pipe replacement program. We have contracts in place for pipe replacement and focusing on, actually a lot of the older cast iron pipe to begin with, because one, it needs to get replaced because of its age, but we also have a lot of breaks. And we do monitor the pipes that have a number of breaks on them. And those are where we do focus resources to replace those pipes and get those repaired. And so we do reduce our loss. But again, we're pretty good, a little over 7% compared to other major municipalities that are, again, 15, 18, 19%.
All right, here's our first YouTube question for the night. What pre-treatment will be included to prevent the hazards of an intake within a ship traffic channel?
Okay, let's have Jason talk about that. The question is probably, how do we protect the water should there be some environmental situation, maybe because of the ship channel? Is that your take on it, Jason, that question?
Yes, sir. That's what I understand as well.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate the question. So the location of the plant does also add some consideration for pre-treatment. And one thing I didn't mention that the team has been doing over the past year and just finished up is 1 year of sampling water quality at the intake locations. So under normal conditions, we absolutely understand the level of naturally occurring parameters, but also constituents like total petroleum hydrocarbons and other organics. So the pre-treatment process will be required to be designed and constructed. And again, as Steve mentioned, our group is not a part of the design or construction or operations process. We're here to help guide the city. But we will put out performance metrics that are going to be required to be met by that design, construction, and operation. So under the very unusual circumstances where there's an event, maybe on the inner harbor, there will be monitoring on the intake that will essentially turn the plant off if what is in the raw water is not something that the pretreatment can handle. So there is a method of checks and balances there on water quality. But I will say under the vast majority of normal circumstances, the pretreatment, which hasn't quite been determined yet, will be able to handle a certain amount of total petroleum hydrocarbons, organics, and whatever may be in the raw water.
All right. I'm being told this is the last question for the night. It's from Facebook. In light of the new findings that red tide has become more frequent due to the increase in salinity, how will the city deal with that?
This actually plays in well to the last one. So I didn't mention any specific pretreatment processes, but one of the processes that's been discussed for quite some time and will likely be a part of the pretreatment is called dissolved air flotation. Dissolved air flotation is a process that is pretty unique in that it allows you to introduce very, very small air bubbles into the stream to float out suspended solids, including harmful algal blooms, red tide, brown tide, and other things. It's very effective even when you have millions and millions and millions of algal cells per liter, like we do here in the coastal bend during a red tide or a brown tide bloom. There are other technologies that you can use in pretreatment to address algae, but the one that primarily can be used, especially during algal blooms that have very high concentrations, it's called dissolved air flotation. It could be a component of the pretreatment, or other processes may be used in its place, but that's one alternative.
And I just want to add, and that's one of the important things about having what we're doing in this project, working with the 11.4 million, building that basis of design so that we build a great like scope, so that we make sure that what we build and what we design for this area fits us and protects our community. And so using that 11.4 million to do our due diligence, to make sure that we answer these questions and good answers, and so that we can be able to site and permit and build that basis of design, so that when we go out for qualifications or go out for a request for proposal, we line everything up to make sure that what we're going to ask the greater world community of contractors and builders, they can start on what protects us. And so working with a great firm like Freese & Nichols, we can make sure we have all those answers.
And Jason, I think the caller might have also, maybe the caller might have been concerned with the discharge, with, the point, but again, like Jason was talking about with the discharge, it's a very clean concentrate, jet diffused concentrate discharge, and it's 0.3 parts per thousand, whereas, the regular variation goes, 17 parts per thousand, ranging back and forth with how saline the bay is over time. So it's a very, very small amount. So we're not really adding, if the caller was concerned about, adding salinity to the bay, which is going to increase red tides, we're not really doing that, again, because of the technology that's been incorporated. And again, that technology was also recommendations that came from different reports, like from the Hart Research Institute and other studies.
Great, Deanna. Is that it on your questions?
Yes, sir. Sending it back to you.
Okay, great. Thank you for your great job and handling those. We appreciate that so much. At this point, we've come to the end of our town hall, and I do believe it's been very productive. We had really good questions tonight. Some were different than our meeting on Tuesday, so that's good. And we have a good audience this evening that is interested in the subject matter. This is an effort to help the community, give us input and help educate the community on a very important policy issue, seawater desalination. But it's not a unique situation. The city's goal is to be transparent and open and inclusive of our community. We want to reach out to the community and communicate with you all as much as we can. Even in these extraordinary pandemic times, we're doing all we can to reach out to the community and communicate with you. So we want to thank you for engaging us tonight. Based on the numbers on Facebook, we had a real good attendance. I haven't seen the numbers for the YouTube or watching on our TV channel, but this is just a testament that the community is engaged here in Corpus Christi, and we're glad that you are. This is very important to us, as it is important to you to get good information. I want to thank our panelists, the mayor, of course, especially the mayor, for being here tonight, and the panelists, Jason and Steve and Kevin, and thank all those that you're not seeing on the camera, to include Deanna and others that have made this possible. We will be back again on Monday. So this week, we did 2 town hall meetings like this, and actually a third meeting that lasted over an hour and a half on public radio, KEDT here in Corpus Christi. The same team was on that show on Wednesday. So we had a town hall meeting Tuesday night, Wednesday in the morning, that KEDT radio show, again here on Thursday. Next week, we'll have 2 more town hall meetings, one on Monday, the 12th of October. That'll be at 6 o'clock. And then Wednesday will be the 4th and the final town hall, the fifth meeting though of the 2-week period. That's Wednesday, October 14th. That'll be at 6 o'clock. So you're more than welcome to join those, even if you've joined tonight's and others this week. We want to encourage you to communicate with your family, friends, those you go to church with, and others to let them know about the town hall meetings. It'll give them an opportunity to ask us questions and learn. And short of that, persons can also go to our website where there's extensive information, including these town halls are recorded and placed on there, and a lot of other good information. That website is desal.cctexas.com. So desal.cctexas.com. I encourage you to look there in the meantime. So we want to thank everybody for their input this evening. We encourage you to stay safe. We're still in the midst of the COVID pandemic. Wear your face masks and social distance. Keep your hands clean and have a great night. We'll see some of you back here next week. Thank you.